In this video, we will implement listing NFTs for sale. So owned NFTs have this sell button. You can click it, enter a price, and then we're gonna call the list NFT function from the smart contract, and then the NFT will be listed for sale. Then we will fetch those NFTs from the Graph API. So let's start with this button here. Currently, clicking on it crashes the application. So let's go and see why. So on button click is the callback that is executed when the button is clicked. So here's the button component that we see here, and the on click is on button click. And depending on the NFT stage, if it's for sale, if it's owned, we perform different actions. So as you can see here, the error is on button clicked called when NFT is not owned and is not listed, and this should never happen. So basically, we enter this else statement, which should never happen. And in this case, it's because we're comparing the NFT.owner to this address, which is hard coded to be an empty string. So let's go ahead and fix that. Let's grab the address from the use signer hook. And now clicking on this will show a pop-up instead of crash the application. So if we go back to the code, the NFT here is owned and is not for sale. So we enter this else statement and we set the sell pop-up open state variable to true. This is just a use state, and we are using that variable in this sell pop-up. So when we set the sell pop-up open to true, this pop-up is rendered visible, as you can see here. And the pop-up has a onSubmit callback, which will be called when we enter a price and click confirm. For now, it doesn't do anything. So for instance, we can just console log price, and we can close the pop-up by setting set sell pop-up open to false. Now if we click confirm, the pop-up closes and we see the price that was submitted. And we can use this price to call the list NFT function from the smart contract. Now you notice that I enter the price in ETH, so I just enter 0.01 ETH, and when I click confirm, the ETH is parsed into way in form of a big number. So if we go to the sell pop-up here, the onConfirm first validates that the price is a valid number, then parses the price from ETH to way. We check that the value is greater than 0. For instance, if we enter 0.0 and click confirm, it's not going to work. We have to enter the value that's greater than 0. And then after all the checks are done, we call the onSubmit callback, passing in the way value here, and that's what we print here. That's what you see. All right, so let's go back to the use NFT market hook, and let's add another function. Call it list NFT. So if you remember, the list NFT function takes a token ID and a price. So let's do the same for this function here. So it's gonna take token ID of type string and a price. In this case, we're using big numbers, so let's type it as a big number here. And we're basically gonna do the same here. So copy these lines. The function is gonna be a list NFT. It's gonna take the token ID and the price. So we're gonna initiate a transaction and wait for it to be mined. That's pretty much it. Let's return the list NFT function here as well. Now go back to the NFT card and grab the newly created function from the use NFT market hook. So use NFT market, and let's get the list NFT function. So when the user enters a price and clicks enter, the first thing we want to do is to close the pop-up, and then we want to set the loading state to true. So the loading state is used in the button, so it will show busy instead of sell, and also the button will be disabled if it's loading. So let's do that. Set loading true, and then we want to call the list NFT function. So await list NFT. So the token ID is going to be the NFT.id. NFT is coming from the props here, and the price will be the price that comes from the arguments. And after that, we're gonna set the loading back to false, and that's pretty much it. And we always want to wrap stuff like this in a try catch block to prevent the app from crashing if something wrong happens. Now let's go back to the front end and let's list the black catcher for, let's say, 0.01 ETH. Click confirm. The loaded state is taking effect here. The button is disabled, and we have this MetaMask pop up as always. Let's confirm. Now that it's mined, we should not see this NFT anymore because it's not owned by the current user. It's owned by the market contract. So if we refresh the page, yeah, it's gone. It's gone. And we need a way to fetch owned but listed NFTs. So we're gonna have two sections here: the owned NFTs and the owned listed NFTs. So go back to your subgraph studio and let's try this in the playground. So we know that all the listed NFTs have the two field set to the contract, the NFT market contract address. So let's do where to is equal to the contract address. Let's grab the contract address from the environment variable. Let's run the query. And as you can see, uh, the second NFT, the NFT that we just listed for sale, is now owned by the contract. And you can see that the from is the address of this account here, 600 at the end. So we can grab the listed NFTs of a user by setting the to the NFT market address and the from to that user address. So from, let's run the query and it's there. So this is the query we want to use in this case. Let's add the price. So let's go back to the NFT market folder and we're gonna create, let's basically just copy this, and here we're gonna call this use owned listed NFTs, and let's export it here, use owned listed NFTs. Let's rename this to use owned listed NFTs. Let's do the same for this variable here. So the query will still have an owner passed in the arguments, but it's going to change basically just this first line here. Let's change the from to point to the owner from the params, and the to, we can leave it hard coded like this. We can also grab it from the environment variables. I think I already do this here. So I can just export this and use it here. Now that we have a new GraphQL query, let's go ahead and run the code gen again. So npx apollo client code gen local schema file schema.graphql target TypeScript. And looks like there's a syntax error here. I guess I forgot quotes. Let's run again. And the new types are generated. So we have the get owned listed NFTs TypeScript interfaces. So go back to the use query and let's use the generated interfaces. So get owned listed NFTs and here get owned listed NFTs variables, which are basically the same as these ones here, but let's stay consistent. I'm gonna call this owned listed NFTs, and this parse row NFT is duplicated now. We have two functions with the exact same logic, so it makes sense to create a helper function here. So let's do that. And let's import it here. Let's do the same for use owned NFTs. Now go back to the index, use NFT market main hook, and let's grab the owned listed NFTs. So const owned listed NFTs equals use owned listed NFTs, and again return it here. Go back to the owned page, and let's also grab the owned listed NFTs. They're gonna have their own section here, so let's separate those. And here, let's do owned listed NFTs. Go back to the front end. I guess let's refresh. So I guess we'll have to create a constants file or config file, whatever, to put the address in. So config.ts. Let's import from here, and let's refresh. As you can see, we have the owned NFTs and listed owned NFTs. And you can tell the difference. This one has the price in the button, this one doesn't. I want to separate the two sections with some kind of divider, so let's do that. So let's not show the divider unless there are some NFTs. So owned listed NFTs, and so this is how the divider looks like. Don't mind me, this is just front end stuff. So yeah, so before I wrap this video, let's quickly implement canceling listed NFTs. It's as simple as calling the cancel listing function from the smart contract. So let's go to the use NFT market hook and let's add another function. Let's basically just copy this one, rename it to cancel listing, and it's gonna take just a token ID. and we're gonna call NFT Market.cancel listing. So let's just make sure. So cancel listing, it takes a token ID, and that's it. Let's return the cancel listing too. Now go back to the NFT card component. We're going to be editing the on cancel clicked. So basically, on cancel clicked will be called if the NFT is owned and is for sale. That's the case with this one. So first thing, let's grab the cancel listing function from the use NFT market hook, and then we want to do basically the same thing here. So let's copy this code. We're not interested in this cell pop-up open state here, so let's remove it. We're gonna set load into true, and then we're gonna call cancel listing, passing in the NFT.id, and then after it finishes, we're gonna set loading back to false, and that's pretty much it. Let's go back to the front end. Let's click cancel. Now that it's confirmed, let's refresh, and the NFT is back to be not listed. This divider should not be shown, so I guess it should do owned listed NFTs and owned listed NFTs.length is greater than 0. Yep. So I guess that's it for this video. In the next one, I will populate this homepage with listed NFTs so other user can buy them, and so we will also implement the buy NFT functionality. See you guys then.